Last night, I finished Metaphor ReFantazio, and now I want to talk about it. So, overall, good game. I enjoyed it. You should buy it. But I have some thoughts. I want to talk about some stuff. Mostly gameplay topics, not so much story topics. But for the sake of not talking in circles, this will contain some light spoilers in the gameplay section about party members and archetypes and things like that. And then later, when I actually discuss the story, it will be full spoilers. So first things first, I want to give Atlus credit for their demo. The demo for Metaphor was excellent. I put like 6 or 8 hours into that demo when it came out, and I was blown away by it. I really enjoyed my time with it, the characters, the gameplay. I was not really interested in Metaphor leading up to its release for a variety of reasons, but when I played that demo, I knew I needed to play this game. And I think that this practice of releasing these kind of content-rich, very, engaging demos is a practice that needs to be industry standard. Everyone needs to do this. Obviously, not everyone can afford a 6-hour demo. That's kind of an Atlus exclusive thing, right? Only their games are long enough to justify this. But even the Final Fantasy 16 demo that came out, a year or two ago, that was similar in how good it was. It sold me on that game. Now, even if that game ultimately was not as good as the demo maybe claimed that it might be, the point is that good demos can only help. And I don't know why they are not more of a thing. And I think Atlus should be applauded and recognized for putting out a demo at all, and then a demo as good as we got from Metaphor. I also want to touch a little bit on the idea of Atlus games and their inevitable re-releases, right? Because it's the meme, it's the joke, but it's true. Every Atlus game gets a re-release a year and a half or 2 years later. And I think that probably will happen here too. But I just want to remind people that if the original game does not sell, then Atlus is not going to re-release a game nobody bought, right? I don't think Atlus is selling us incomplete products intending to re-release them 2 years later as a finished version. The exception was Shin Megami Tensei 5, but I think COVID may have had a factor in that. We don't have to talk about all the details of that. But the point is that if you are interested in Atlus or interested in these games that they make, you should buy the game now and then buy the re-release when it comes out, because the re-release is more content. It's more of what you liked before, and it's new stuff, it's refined mechanics, it's shinier things, right? I'm not saying you have to buy both day one full price if that's not something you want to do, but you should support the original release and then, not complain when the re-release happens, because the re-release is just making a better version of a product. And frankly, I think a lot of games would benefit from a re-release. The Resident Evil 3 remake that we got a few years ago would benefit greatly from some kind of director's cut or re-release or something that Capcom does not do, but Atlus does. And we got that already with Shin Megami Tensei, 5 Vengeance. Not a perfect product, but a much better product than we got originally. So before I start talking about any criticisms of the game, I want to offer a couple pieces of praise. And like I said, overall, I really like this game, so I'm just highlighting a couple key areas here. First of all, I think the story is really good. Without getting into details, I think that the story, both as its own piece of fiction and media, tells an engaging story that also has something to say. And I think that Luis is an excellent villain. And I can't say a lot more than that at this point in time. But he's a great villain. All right. The changes to core systems in this game, such as the bond system coming over from Persona, very good. They cut it down from 10 ranks across the board to 8 across the board. And I think that this does a lot in terms of the narrative and the pacing of these. But it's not perfect, unfortunately. But overall, I think it's an improvement. It's a positive step forward. The protagonist having a voice. This blew me away in the demo. I was genuinely not expecting this. And I'm so happy they did this. I think it works out extremely well throughout the game that the protagonist has not just a voice that you hear often, but very much a defined character of their own. Because I think Atlus has been towing this line for a long time where they want, like Joker, for instance, to have something of a personality, but are unwilling to really commit to it. But I think they need to commit to these characters, because when people and teams do commit to their characters, we end up getting Yu Narukami from the Persona 4 anime, and it's fucking great. I think the archetype system is really good in general. It's another addition to the job-based RPG genre that I enjoy so much, up there with Final Fantasy 3, 5, Bravely Default, games like this. So I enjoy it, but as usual, it comes with an assortment of problems, and those are some of the ones that I'm going to talk about moving forward here. So like I said, those are just some very general praises I wanted to give to the game before we jump into some of the criticisms. The bulk of my criticisms, I think, come down to the fact that I don't think Atlus learned as many lessons as they should have from their previous titles. And I don't know if this is because different teams are working on them and they don't communicate. I don't know if this is because multiple games are in development simultaneously, and so it's hard for them to share ideas or to know what is a good idea or what is a bad idea, what will work, what won't until the game comes out. But there are several things here that they do that they should know better by now, and they should not have done. One of the reasons I bought the game was because the demo really instilled into me the sense that they had taken steps forward for their games, both in the Shin Megami Tensei and the Persona aspects. They had taken steps forward. But some of these things show me that they have not learned all the lessons. They've learned a few lessons, but not all of them. The first one that stood out to me, I did buy the Shill edition, the $100 edition of the game, because I did want to support it, and it sounded, like a decent amount of content, right? But they have not learned from what they did in Persona 5, where the music and the costumes are connected. You can't go into a music menu like they just added to Persona 3 Reload a couple months ago. They just added this. There's no music menu here. You can't select what music you want. You can't have a playlist of music across like the 12 different tracks or whatever. No, you equip the samurai outfit from Shin Megami Tensei 4, and that's the music that you're listening to. And this is shitty. This is really shitty, not just because it restricts players' freedom and creativity, but also, like, Shin Megami Tensei 4 has a lot of banger music in it, but that original battle track is really not one of them. They could have at least chosen like the Minotaur theme, that first boss battle theme you hear. They could have at least chosen that. On the flip side, the Hermelin outfit from Persona 1 is hideous. It's boring, it's bland, I don't like looking at it, and obviously it doesn't fit into the world at all. But Lone Prayer is an absolute banger that I could listen to all day. But I don't, because the costume is ugly as sin. I do not know how they consistently get this wrong. Even when Persona 3 Reload came out, they got this wrong because the music player they did have in it was not perfect. It was not very good and only got fixed recently with the release of Episode Igus. Another thing that they've been doing for a long time, in starting with Persona 5 Original and carrying forward into Royal and also into Reload, is when you open up a treasure chest and you get a new weapon, your character will say, hey, that's a cool looking weapon, let me equip this. And in Persona, they won't tell you anything about the weapon. There's no statistics on your current weapon. There's no statistics on the new weapon. I think it's just based on whether or not the base power, which is a meaningless number, anyone knows it's pointless. I think that's all it's based on. If it's a higher base number, the character's like, oh, let me equip that. And then I have to go into the menu to even find out what it is and whether or not it's worth equipping. And so it just slows down the process of opening treasure chests, especially in Reload, where I have to open like 9 treasure chests after these damn monad doors. My character's like, oh, let me equip this, let me equip this. No. You're already wearing the best shit in the game. Don't equip anything, right? And here, they have the exact opposite problem. They have, in 2 different games, half of a functional system. Here, the game tells you what the item is, but it does not give you the option to immediately equip it. It forces you to go into the menu to equip it anyway. So why bother telling me what it is? Especially when you already have the party member asking to equip an item system in Persona. Why not combine these systems and make one fully functional, convenient system so I don't have to go into the equipment menu as often? It just doesn't make any sense. I can't explain why each game has half of a functional system here. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it became kind of annoying. Similarly, I don't think they learned all the right lessons from the Haru situation in Persona 5. Because in the original Persona 5, Haru joined really late, and so she had a lack of screen time, and also it was hard to justify putting her in your party. It was hard to level her up. It was hard to spend time with her because of where she showed up and how little of the game came after Haru joined. The same kind of thing happens here to some extent with all of the characters, but especially Basilio. Now, he definitely gets screen time. They learned that lesson. But gameplay-wise, I think that he starts on such a back foot, it's hard to justify using him for hours. You would really need to throw all kinds of like items and mag and other resources at him in order for him to become usable as soon as you get him. And his unique archetype that he adds to the collection, the Berserker, and its line, are not even that special. They're pretty good. They're okay. They have some powerful synergies that I did later discover. But if you compare him to Juna and her mass dancer line, which is super interesting and is a crazy kind of job to introduce into a job system like this, jobs within jobs, it's really interesting and helps to, in some ways, circumvent her late joining because it lets her compensate with all kinds of other skills without needing to invest into any other archetype. Similarly, Yufa has the same thing with Summoner, where she can be very powerful and very versatile without ever delving into any other archetypes. They clearly just have some intended canon archetypes for these characters. Everyone very clearly does. I'll talk about that in a moment. But by comparison, Basilio and his Berserker are just normal classes. There's really nothing special about them at all. And so it takes time and effort to make them usable. And I don't know why this is the case. I suspect that that section of the game where Basilio joins and where you fight that dragon, I think all of that section at the Mage Academy got cut or condensed. I don't think it was complete. And I think if we get a re-release of this game, this is one of the areas they will expand on. Because Basilio doesn't even get his awakening to his archetype in a combat situation like everyone else does. It just happens in a much more peaceful setting. And it's a good scene. I like the scene, right? But it stands out. And then you add to that how weak he is when he joins and how unspecial his class is. It makes me feel like he was a late addition to the party. Especially when there was another Parapus character, Katarina, who had been around literally the entire game. And I was convinced she would be a party member because of her presence on the box art, because of how much she shows up, because of the way that she talks to you. I thought she'd be a party member. And she's not. But there's a skill that lets her help you in fights, which kind of furthers my theory that I think at some point these two characters might have been swapped. Maybe Katarina was meant to join early. Then they changed their mind. They thought they needed one of Luis's people on your team, even though technically, Juna could fill that role, right? And so we got Basilio. I'm not sure. That's a theory that I've got, but I think it's very plausible, and I think it's also likely in a re-release, Katarina will join as a formal party member. Now, him being on the back foot and this problem might not be so bad if Mag was not such a limited resource. In the beginning, it doesn't seem like it will be, because you get more than there is anything to spend it on. But by the time you get to the mid-game and the late game, you never have enough mag to do fucking anything. You are constantly grinding and scavenging for any little bit of mag you can get, because you need it to do everything, especially once you start getting into these royal archetypes. You need hundreds of thousands of mag to do fucking anything, just to unlock a class, let alone unlock and carry over abilities, which Basilio also needs. And he also needs the slots to inherit those skills, which can only be gotten through his bond, which is only really available halfway through once you get him in that section. It just takes a really long fucking time to get Basilio up to speed where everyone else already is by the time he joins. Partially because everyone else can be maxed out so quickly. Now, like I said, I think the archetype system is actually quite good in a way. It's very open, and you do have a lot of freedom for customization. But I think they shoot themselves in the foot here over and over with this. This seems very clear to me that this is their first kind of time dabbling in this because of the things they do that I feel as though shoots them in the foot. So I think in general, these types of games can lean on a spectrum, either farther toward the Final Fantasy III style of you just need a party of Dragoons to kill the Garuda. That's really the intent, the developer intended way. You're not meant to do it anyway. That's the correct solution. Every situation in a game can be a puzzle meant to solve with the classes you're given. Or you can have a more free-form style that I think Final Fantasy V represents, where there's no intended solution. They just throw a bunch of shit at you and whatever works, works. Now, I certainly don't think that Metaphor is exactly like Final Fantasy III. I think it's closer to the end of Final Fantasy V than that game is, obviously, being the other end of the spectrum. But there are a lot of situations in which they tell you, hey, you are not allowed to do X, Y, or Z, or you will be punished for it, right? So they do try to limit your choices quite a lot. And the royal archetypes themselves kind of run in complete contrast to this system. So, for instance, if I wanted Stroll for whatever reason, if I just chose, like, hey, I want this guy to be a mage, well, I'm shooting myself in the foot because later on, he can only get his best archetype and his most powerful skills if he has maxed out two completely different job lines, right? But I wouldn't know that going in. Now, thankfully, I wasn't that dumb. I didn't try to make Stroll a mage, right? I think most people are a little bit inclined to keep people in their starting or canon classes, right? But the fact that the best stuff is locked behind these very linear, very specific lines of progression that also require enormous amounts of time, resources, and effort to unlock, it does a bit of a disservice to the freedom of choice. Why would I ever do anything different? If I replayed the game, why would I make Stroll anything other than a warrior and a general, right? Those are the best choices. And because I know that mag is a scarce, limited resource, that is the most efficient, best option. It may not be the best option in the moment. It may further lean toward this puzzle-solving aspect of you need to solve these problems not with all the resources you're given, but with the resources and the characters that you're given, fitting into the long-term plan here. But if you're going to restrict me either with like hard lines or soft lines in the sand, why have the system at all? It's as if they decided late into development that everyone would have access to archetypes as opposed to just your character, right? Because it seems like everyone has a canon class, a canon progression that you even see in cutscenes later, right? All of this is just a thing they intend. There's a certain way they intend you to play. And while you don't have to, it is suboptimal. You are punished for playing outside of it. And if you made enough mistakes, it becomes then more difficult to get someone like Heisme, who has the most ridiculous requirements to get into his royal archetype, the most nonsensical, ridiculous investment of resources required to get him into that class. And the result is, because I didn't initially have him following that line anyway, I had him going down maybe the trickster route as opposed to the gunner route a little bit. And again, resources were scarce, right? I had to make decisions if I was going to use Heisme or Juna. And I chose Juna, all right? So I didn't even use Heisme for most of the time. And when I did try to use him, he was underpowered, so he never contributed. Though I understand he could be very powerful if I did follow the intended progression, and I got him to his intended royal archetype. But the freedom of a class system is shot in the foot when you introduce ultimate jobs that require specific progressions for specific people. That aside, I thought some of the jobs themselves were a little bit underwhelming. So the entire night line was a little bit confusing to me. I'm not entirely sure what they want you to do with this job other than defend all the time. And the core problem with defending is the same problem you see in any other game that has this, basically. It doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. because every boss has a bunch of AoE attacks that will hit your entire team and bypass that guard entirely. You can't force them to redirect their multi-target attacks toward your character in any way or mitigate damage taken by them. So if the boss is using a bunch of AoE attacks, a knight is not very helpful. And it's not until later that the knight gets to be able to counter attacks and potentially shut down enemy offensives with their innate abilities, their innate passives. Similarly, their offensive capabilities seem really limited outside of synergies, but if I'm supposed to be defending all the time, when am I going to have a chance to attack, let alone use a synergy, right? Until later when you get items that help reduce the cost of synergies. As well, Paladin and Dark Knight were a little bit underwhelming to me personally. Paladin I thought was fine because it was just a natural upgrade of the Magic Knight, although I think Magic Knight's a weird path of progression, but I kind of get it. But Dark Knight, I don't know what makes the Dark Knight a Dark Knight. It's just a Magic Knight. It's an advanced Magic Knight. But isn't that what the Paladin is supposed to be? I don't get the difference. Its only elemental attacks are the last one it gets, which is a Thunder attack, and then its synergies use Dark Magic. But then you take the Warlock, which has all kinds of dark skills that are really interesting. It doesn't seem like a fair comparison. I think that class is a little bit underpowered. Similarly, I think that the Thief and the Gunner are built largely around inflicting status effects, except I found that status effects never worked. I would try to use them, but they didn't work. The ones you get access to early are Sleep, Poison, and Rage is pretty early too. But all the other ones, like Daze, and I can't even, Frostbite, Burn, these ones come later. And I don't think you even get access to some of them, like Paralysis, or, you can't cause anxiety to the enemies. You have Forget, but that's kind of tied in with martial classes. But I find that a lot of these just didn't work a lot of the time. Hex never worked for me, unfortunately, on anything, so I don't even know why the skill exists. So I didn't use these lines very much, which again kind of shot me in the foot when I wanted to use Heismay. Now, it's not like I needed Heismay. I had plans without the guy. But it felt bad that I was forced to use or to at least spend my time, throwing items at these classes that seemed very underwhelming. And I wish that the classes just weren't underwhelming. I wish that the Thief and I forget what even the second tier of Thief is called, to be honest. Thief, Ninja, Royal, Thief. I don't know what that second tier was called. I forget. But I wish that they were a little bit more interesting. And I think the choice of making the Dragoon, putting that name with the Gunner class, is a little weird. And I don't know. I feel like that should have been another area where there were two different archetypes. And for that matter, I'm kind of upset a little bit that not more classes had two archetypes. I would have liked to see maybe something alongside Samurai, for instance. That could have been cool. In terms of specific abilities, I think some of them came really late. Now, because of how open the system is and how you unlock stuff, you could unlock some of this stuff really early. But unless you know ahead of time all these details and you rush these things, I think a lot of people will end up without Penpatra for a long time. I did. I did not have Penpatra for most of the game. And so when I got to a boss that could inflict status ailments on my entire party every single time it attacked consistently, it became very difficult to deal with that situation. And there wasn't really a short-term solution to that problem because it was a story boss. I only unlocked Penpatra much later through leveling up the bond and through grinding the necessary experience for multiple jobs and getting the items in order to get that damn skill. And there are basically no items that do this. There are some, but they are very limited. And it's funny because in Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, I find often you get these skills too early. You get them so early it trivializes status effects. Here, I think they maybe went the other way. Again, if you rushed it, you might be able to get it mid-game or earlier than I did. But I find that unlikely that people will do that on a first playthrough. I also thought it was very interesting that all of the HP-based physical attacks were restricted to the martial arts brawler line. I don't mind that. I think having physical attacks that consume both HP and MP is a good idea. I do generally prefer in my Shin Megami Tensei games HP for physical attacks and MP for magic attacks. I do generally prefer that, but I'm willing to compromise, and I'm open to a system where both types of abilities can use both systems. So what I would have liked to have seen alongside this was perhaps a type of blood magic that used HP as a source of magic damage. That would have been really cool to contrast the martial artist. I also thought it was interesting that there were seemingly no HP-based slash attacks, only pierce and strike. That just struck me as a weird exclusion, and I don't know if it was intentional or if it was an oversight. The Dancer and the Summoner are two of the most interesting jobs that I've seen. It's a really good system. The Dancer especially. Once I realized how powerful Dancer was, I always had Juna in my party, and she was always hitting something with Dance. My end game strategy was hit it with a dance, hit it with a synergy attack, amp to shit, right? And everything died in like 1 to 3 attacks doing that. It was super simple, but it was very effective. Dancer is incredibly powerful and incredibly versatile. Summoner is not as powerful or as versatile, but this is probably the most interesting Summoner I have seen in a game. Because usually Summoner is a bit disappointing. Usually the MP costs are too high, the damage is too low, it's just too impractical. But here, while those costs can be high early on, by the end, they're pretty reasonable costs given what they are able to do, especially alongside a Dancer. Now, this one is kind of a spoiler, but it's an archetype spoiler. Your character gets a unique archetype. And I thought it was very disappointing, personally, because I think it continues the trend of this kind of very clear bias in recent Atlus games toward physical-based characters, and magical characters always just kind of get crapped on a little bit. This class has a lot of physical-based attacks, but I was a magic-based character, so I never even bothered using the fucking class. So when it forced me to use the class twice, I was kind of upset about it, right? I would have liked to have seen perhaps multiple different versions of this class, or at least the class itself to be more versatile so that it did not feel useless and that I never wanted to use it for a character like myself who just did not happen to be building into strength. Or as supporting the party. I was the main magical damage dealer, which is really just not what this class is about. Moving to abilities you get from your bonds. Like I said, I think 8 ranks is a big improvement. But the actual rewards that you get throughout them are all over the place, ranging from worthless to why is this not a core ability, and making me question, why does this character give this ability? So for instance, Gallica is supposedly our navigator, right? That's the implication. That seems to be the case. She's the one who is scanning these things, giving us the information. She is always with us, narrating on the battle. And yet, what I would consider to be one of the most important features for a navigator to have, the ability to actually scan an enemy, does not come from Gallica. It comes from an entirely different character. And I don't even necessarily see the association. If you squinted, if you stretched, you could make the argument. But to me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense why this character gives me this thing, and at this time, it comes so late. As opposed to something like speed cooking that comes incredibly early, so early that I had never spent time cooking before I unlocked this ability. I unlocked it almost immediately. On the topic of Gallica herself, I think they learned a lot of lessons from previous mascots, because Gallica is amazing. I love Gallica as a character. And as a navigator, she's pretty good as well. But in terms of being a story-locked party member or job class, it's really bad. By the time you get the elite tier mage classes, I already had unlocked everything else for everybody else. It comes way too late, especially considering mage is one of the first archetypes you get, and that people might choose to spec into it because it makes the most logical sense for your character in a lot of respects, given who else joins your party early on. And I don't know why it comes so late. It felt really annoying to me that this class I wanted to use was constantly on the back foot, because I was locked into progressing it only at the pace decided by the story. I do not like this. Katarina has an interesting ability where eventually she'll be able to join you in combat in dungeons, where she'll just show up if you get an ambush attack on the enemy, and she'll just do a devastating attack to one individual enemy. And on bosses, this is really good. She will just knock off like 1/3 of a boss's health for free at the start of a fight. But it's kind of a little bit annoying in normal battles that she does it all the time, and she only does it to one enemy. I mean, it's kind of helpful, but at that point, by the time you get this, at least for me when I got it, and I think, you know, it's another one of these things that happens very late into the story and requires some very high royal virtues. By the time you get it, you don't need her help outside of boss fights. So it's just kind of annoying that it slows down the process of grinding a little bit more. As well, I think it's further evidence that she was probably supposed to be a party member. I don't know why they would add this in here if they had not had some early idea that this character would join your party as an actual controllable companion. So moving on now to the story section and talking about the story. This will be full spoilers, so if you've not finished the game, you know, check out here. But like I said, overall, I really enjoyed the game. I don't actually have a lot of notes. I'm really not going to sit here and just glaze every part of the story for no reason. I think the characters are good. I think the story itself is good. In general, I think it's well paced and it fits with the gameplay. I don't have many concerns, but I had a couple, not concerns, but thoughts as I was playing through the game. And the first one that kept coming up for me was how quickly the team and the group kept coming up with these really half-assed, harebrained schemes to make shit work that really had no business working out in their favor, that should have been undermined immediately and were not. I found it amusing in the beginning and a little bit unbelievable toward the middle. But then when they reveal that Zorba was still alive and was acting as this secret spy for Luis, I was like, this is great. This makes perfect sense. Because the one lingering question I had for so long was like, so like, we're going to pretend to be in Luis's party, but like, did he not wonder what happened to Zorba? Does nobody know what happened to Zorba? What happened to that guy, right? I thought that was a really good play. And I thought that was a really interesting idea of setting this character up in the beginning as just kind of maybe one of a few bad guys in his retinue that we would, you know, fight our way through. We get rid of him really quick. We don't think about it. But then he shows up later in a more significant role as a kind of rival. I like that. And for me, it justified a lot of what Luis was doing, because I kept saying to myself, like, this guy has to know, right? He's on to our shit. He knows what we're up to. And so the reveal that not only did he knew everything. He wasn't just a little bit suspicious, but playing along for fun. He knew everything and was 5 steps ahead of us the entire time. I think this added to his character. Now, I don't think the only good thing about Luis is that he has this kind of wild foresight plan. I just think he's a really good, complex, interesting villain. He does have a little bit of the typical villain problem of, like, you know, monologuing and letting people live when he really shouldn't. But, you know, we need to tell a story, so I'm going to let that go. And when you get right down to it, there's a lot of good reasons for why he does basically everything that he does overall, and also as small actions in the story. So, like, the fact that he himself is an Elda can explain a lot of why he goes along with this bullshit at all. He's just not that quick to strike down his own people, perhaps. Maybe the only other one of his people that still exists outside of the Sanctum. That may be a part of this. So when he sees your character leading this group of people, including Stroll, who calls him out in that public soiree, he respects all of it because he sees himself in the player character. And he is basically very similar. They are foils in that way, where they both want to change the world. They're both very powerful characters. They do have some allies in some forms. But ultimately, Luis is just too damn cynical to really succeed in changing the world. His only solution to the very real problems that he brings up, all of Luis's points about humanity, the nature of people, like the fact that people will, the reveal that basically the way people are acting is not some kind of magic making them worse. It's actually the magic that was keeping them in check removed. And this is just how people are. I thought that was really good because I think it reflects reality, right? People are just this fucking crazy. No magic required, right? So he makes some very valid points about, look, we got to burn the system down. The system's bad, and the people that system has created are bad. He reminded me a lot of Lelouch Lamperouge in that way. You know, my favorite character in any fictional thing ever. This is a guy who sees the injustice and evil in the world, was a personal victim to it, has suffered to it, finds himself in a position of power, has great power, wants to use it to change the world, and will stop at nothing. The difference between, you know, Lelouch and Luis, and also Luis and our character, though, is just how deep he is in his own hate and misery. You know, he says that he's not doing it out of revenge, but the characters call him out a lot that he is consumed in revenge, and his methods in particular to changing the world are just a few steps over the line. You know, I don't think in his mind he anticipates a world-ending scenario. Maybe an optimistic part of him thinks more people will overcome the apocalypse than not. But either way, he's willing to just end the fucking world. He wants to burn everything and everyone, and his idea of equality is very Darwinian. Whoever survives, they deserve to have survived, this kind of Darwinian meritocracy. And again, while all of his points are very valid about the nature of people and why the system probably does need to be burned down, the fact that he's willing to burn it down so indiscriminately, the fact that he is so indiscriminate is really the key difference here, right? Whereas the heroes are like, look, that's just fucked up, dude. Some people are weak, okay? But you can't just kill them because they're weak. They need to be protected. There are strong people, there are weak people. It is not the job of the strong people to kill all the weak people and let all the weak people die off. If all the weak people die off, the whole tier list, the whole spectrum gets shifted, and now suddenly all the strong. This is the problem with chaos in the series of, you know, SMT. There's never any peace with chaos. It's always a sliding scale. The strongest will always be challenged, and if you want to be the strongest, then you need to beat the strongest. It's this everlasting cycle of violence. The character solution is a little bit more optimistic and trying to change the system, not necessarily from within. They are changing the system itself, you know, breaking down parts of it, removing corruption from it, but just something less drastic that Luis has been driven out of. And the king, as an element in all of this, where he is also this idealist, who has just simply given up. Your character represents pure idealism, driven and committed to the end. Nothing will stop this level of idealism and this commitment to change. Luis is someone who had idealism and the will to change the world, but was driven to the point of complete cynicism. The king just gave up, right? He's like, I've lost the will. I still want to change the world, and I have some idealistic ideas, but I have simply lost the will to do it. I think that this is a really interesting dynamic. And as far as the themes of the story go, yeah, I mean, it starts off really hard with the message of like racism bad. And I think some people may look at the game and think that's all there is to it, but that's really not all there is to it. Ultimately, it's a dissection of people and systems, societies, cultures, and our relationship with media, fiction, our own creativity, our dreams, right? I think that these are all very interesting ideas that I think that they explore in an engaging way. I'm not claiming anything here is revolutionary or mind-blowing, because I'm not really sure that it is, but it was enjoyable, and I don't mind that it was on the nose. I hate this idea that some people have that, like, if something is not subtle, if it basically says anything other than nothing, then it was saying too much. I don't agree with that. This is shit people need to hear. Probably not the people who are playing it. Let's be real. If you're playing Metaphor, you probably don't need to hear this shit. But these things that are being said in this game are real things that real people in the real world need to fucking hear so they can wake up and stop being such an asshat, right? But of course, they won't hear it. And if they do, they're like, I don't want it, right? But they're good messages, and I don't mind them being touted in such an open and direct way. I actually appreciate that the game is just willing to come out and say, look, this is how people are. It's bad. Stop doing it, right? We need more media that's just willing to come out and say that. Because a lot of times we dance around it and we're like, let's all get along. Let's talk about stuff, but let's not get anything done, right? Because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or anything. I guess my only real complaint with the story, other than a few pacing issues in that Mage Academy section and the whole stuff with Rella, I just thought the ending went on a little long. Like, you finish the game, you beat the boss, and I feel like there's 2 hours of cutscenes. Like, the game keeps going. Not just cutscenes, but then there's an additional gameplay section. You have your typical, before the game ends, you're going to go around and talk to all your bonds. You do that, it's good. They give you something. I really like all those conclusions because, again, I really like all those bonds. And then, 2 hours later, you do it again in a post, in a year afterwards, which, in a way, I like, because a lot of times games will not show you the consequences of your actions. And I do wonder how much the ending changes based on your actions, because I did everything. I did all the bonds. I did all the side quests that I could. And I did kill the quote-unquote super bosses, the dragons, right? So I got, presumably, the best possible outcome, the most optimistic scenario. And I do wonder, I haven't looked it up yet. I tried a little bit, but I don't think enough people have finished the game to have a lot of definitive information on this yet. I do wonder how much the ending changes if you don't do those things. What does the game look like? How does that world look a year afterwards if you didn't max out any of the bonds? You didn't establish those connections. Those people aren't making the world a better place. And you didn't kill the dragons. Because there were several scenes where they talked about these dragons, and I thought the material rewards for killing them were really shitty. But then the narrative rewards made themselves apparent. And I wonder how all of this factors in. I think there may be a lot of subtle variations in these endings that I appreciate. Regardless, it just kept going. There were several points where it should have just ended, including the point where, the king, the narrator, is just like, thanks for playing, dude. I hope this meant something to you. And there was still another cutscene after that. It was nonstop. It was exhausting how long it went on for. But overall, like I said at the beginning, I enjoyed this game. I'm happy with this game, but I do wish that some of these things were better. Now, I'm willing to admit that some of the problems I encountered gameplay-wise and some of my criticisms here, or just my comments and thoughts, may be solved as I continue to play, right? I think that this system is very open and it's a very complex system that has a lot of different answers. I hear a lot of people talking about Heismay just dodge tanking everything. I hear a lot of people talking about Hulkenberg just tanking everything. I hear a lot of people talking about one-shotting stuff. And while I found a way to deal significant damage to most things, most bosses did not get one-shot by my strategy. They took at least 2 or 3 shots of this synergy ability to take them down. So I'm curious what these one-shot strategies are. I think there's very clearly a lot of depth here in the game to talk about and to explore and to learn. But on a first playthrough, I don't think all the systems came together in the most synergistic way to deliver the best possible experience. I think this is a game that is going to be better a second or a third time through when you have knowledge and the ability to prepare and plan ahead. But some of my complaints, I hope they just fix, either in patches soon, like the ability to just change music and choose it independently. That would be great. The ability to equip stuff when you pick it up out of a treasure chest, or maybe some improvements to how characters join, like the level they join at in their archetypes, or the amount of skill slots they have starting out, or the order in which abilities are unlocked. I might appreciate any of these things in a patch. And I definitely can see where this game might go if they choose to re-release it. I can see the Mage Academy as an area that gets fleshed out. I can see rebalance of the combat, maybe additional job classes, so you have more options. So maybe there is an option alongside Samurai. There is option is alongside the Dragoon. I can see all of these things being in a re-release, and I can also see how they have maybe set this world up for a sequel because, yeah, they talk about it a lot, but we only save the country. Apparently, there's a whole other world to explore here that we haven't explored yet. That could be interesting. That's maybe what Katarina's up to. So I'm looking forward to more content in this world that they've set up. I'm looking forward to this direction that Atlus has taken. I hope Persona 6 learns from all of these lessons and more. And obviously, whatever the next Shin Megami Tensei game comes out, whenever that is, probably 10 years from now, I hope they also take some of these lessons. I haven't mentioned, the SMT part a lot here because it's mostly the combat that gets taken from. It's very clearly a Persona-inspired title. But I think even in terms of the combat system, there's a lot of positive steps forward here. So I think that I'm optimistic about what comes next from Atlus, but I am not fully dissuaded of all my concerns. I won't be buying the next DLC pack because I can't trust that Atlus will make a smart decision at this point regarding how to implement that music and that DLC into the game, as an example. So I hope that they can demonstrate a willingness and a flexibility to adjust these things on the fly, or maybe drop the re-release practice altogether and just say, hey, we're doing DLC. We're doing a gold edition, right? You can buy this at a discounted price. It's going to revamp the game, but you can still access the original. I just think that this is the direction that they need to take. But I've rambled on enough, so I appreciate you listening. Thanks for listening. And hopefully I'll have more videos out soon. I know I haven't made any in a while. I got lost trying to really edit down stuff to a fine point, and it spiraled out of control a little bit. But these more off the cuff discussions are a little bit easier for me to make as opposed to spending hours editing out delays in the audio and stuff like that. So hopefully more will come that will be a mix of both.